so early, it's still dark outside. It's about 5 a.m. and she can barely keep herself awake. She has to make her husband and children breakfast and, of course, her husband's lunch for while he's at work. As her husband wakes up, she hurries to put her newspaper on the table and a special note that she wrote just for him. As he and the children run downstairs, she prepares their plates. All of them sit down like clockwork, and she watches as her husband picks up the newspaper, but pays no attention to her special note as it drops to the floor. He's very grumpy, so she doesn't dare ask him to pick it up. As soon as breakfast is over, she puts her kids on the school bus and kisses her husband on the cheek, as the grueling routine continues. As she walks back and sits inside, she sits in the chair where her note is under. She sits in the painstakingly somber, quiet, lonely place she calls home. She sadly looks at the crumpled up note under her chair. She'll have to clean that mess up. Her husband would be very disappointed to come home to a mess like that. Of course, this was a fictional example of the struggles of women back then, but with very true facts. Today, I'm going to discuss with sources and examples of the rights of women. I would like to say that the information I'm going to give comes from my research. Today, I'd like to show you how women have evolved from minimal to independent, strong women. I have divided the examples into three main categories: the roles of women that have changed, social changes and movements, and key women who have influenced this change. Changed expected role of women especially occurred in World War II. The National World War II Museum, New Orleans, states that women took men's jobs during World War II. They had to support themselves financially for the first time and experience working for themselves. They made lots of money and they had to financially experience this for the first time. They were also army nurses. This was a profession that used to be only men, but now it was a women's work instead of secretaries and teachers. The National World War II Museum, New Orleans, also states that women were having less children and the divorce rates were higher, up to 40% after World War II. Also, women adopted the traditional flapper look with short hair and provocative clothing. This was also another cultural way of women to express themselves in the new way. Now that I have previously explained the changed role of women, now I'll explain the changes and movements that affected women's rights. The women's suffrage timeline from the National Women's History states the Seneca Falls Convention was the first convention where women got together and discussed equal rights and their right to vote. This included Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and other key women that influenced this change. Also, the women's suffrage movement. This was the huge umbrella under women's suffrage, and it was many, many years, and one that is still not completely over. Of course, also the 19th Amendment, which also gave women the right to vote. These were all stated by the National Women's History Museum. Now, after looking at the change that prompted the social changes and movements, now we will look at key women who have influenced this change. The National Women's History Museum also states that Susan B. Anthony, born in 1820, was an abolitionist, suffragist, author, and speaker of the National Women's Suffrage Association. She was a major role in women's suffrage, and she created many women's rights and strove for the right to vote. Her partner, also Elizabeth Cady Stanton from the National Women's History Museum, also states that Cady was born in 1815 and was an author, lecturer, and chief philosopher of women's rights. She also strove for suffrage and the right to vote, and through her life she dedicated her work to women's rights. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were major roles in women's rights and are still remembered today for their amazing achievements. I hope that I have informed you all of the amazing journey of reforming women's rights. It was an amazing few years, and it's a struggle that's still not over today. We still have to improve on some things, but I hope I have informed you of the things that we have accomplished so far. I'd like to thank the National Women's History Museum and the National World War II Museum, New Orleans for my sources. Thank you.